Okay, we are right at 9. Let's get it started. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Bureau seminar series. It's my great honor to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Sallie Greenberg from the Illinois State Geological Survey. She will be talking about Bioenergy CCS. So let me give you a brief introduction about Sallie before she starts her talk. Dr. Sallie Greenberg is a principal scientist of energy and minerals at the Illinois State Geological Survey, University of Illinois. She is the principal investigator for the Midwest Geological Sequestration Consortium, one of the U.S. Department of Energy's original 7 regional sequestration partnerships. Dr. Greenberg is the co-principal investigator for the Midwest Regional Carbon Initiative and CO2 Regional Deployment Initiative focused on carbon capture, utilization, and storage deployment in the Midwest and Northeast United States. In these roles, Dr. Greenberg leads teams of scientists, engineers, and policymakers working on several carbon capture and geologic storage projects, including the Illinois Basin Decatur Project, CarbonSAFE Illinois Corridor, Wabash CarbonSAFE, and the Illinois Industrial Carbon Capture and Storage projects. Over the last 20 years, she has consulted or contributed to more than 30 energy and carbon capture and storage projects, especially in the area of project development, risk reduction, and stakeholder engagement. Dr. Greenberg uses her advanced degree in low temperature geochemistry and education to create strategies for change based on understanding public challenges related to balancing societal demands for energy with environmental concerns. Dr. Greenberg holds a PhD in secondary and continuing education and Master of Science degree in geology from the University of Illinois, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in geology from Alfred University in New York. So with that, I would like to welcome Sallie again. So let me turn it over to you. You're welcome to share your slides and start your talk.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Shahar, for having me, and to the Bureau of Economic Geology. It's my delight to be here today to present to you some information about our work in Illinois. And I do wish I was there with you in person, but hopefully we'll be able to do that again one of these days soon. So let me set my slides up and then get ready to share with you this morning. So I'm going to talk to you about several different projects and activities today. And I like to think about carbon capture and storage somewhat holistically, from everything from the technical space to the social space to legal and policy and regulatory. And what's really exciting, you heard in my bio that I've been working in this area for more than 20 years. And what's really exciting is that within the last few years, really the puzzle pieces have come together, and we can think about CCS in a very comprehensive system. And if you look at the icons along the bottom of this slide, I also like to show just how far we've come, even in the way that we use language. We used to talk about technical and non-technical barriers when we first started this work, and everything was perceived as what's going to stop us from doing CCS. Then we looked at what might be our obstacles. What did we need to overcome to be able to do projects? Eventually, those obstacles turned to challenges, and then we started to see significant successes in the 2015 timeframe. And I would say pretty much since 2017, we've been well on the path to commercial deployment and to advancement of CCS by bringing all these puzzle pieces together. There we go. So, and that has happened primarily because of the US Department of Energy's cumulative and significant investment in our ability to do carbon capture and storage across the United States. And we initially did that through a series of 7 partnerships. I'm the principal investigator of one of those. Your own Sue Havorka and many others at BEG have been involved in two of the other partnerships, and we have all been long-term colleagues for many, many years. Within the last few years, the Department of Energy has consolidated those 7 partnerships into 4. And I am now sharing the Midwest Northeast region with Battelle. So the University of Illinois and Battelle National Labs have combined to facilitate policy, deployment, regulatory aspects, all sorts of advancement for CCS in our region. And you will see that you there in Texas are involved in basically 2 of the partnerships as you were initially. And the pop out in the upper right is about the work, the CarbonSAFE project that we have going on in the Midwest region. And I'll get to that in a little bit more detail here in just a minute. So I like to look at Illinois somewhat holistically, and that is that we've really leveraged the work that we have been doing with the Department of Energy since 2003 to scale up CCS from biofuels. So we are a true bioenergy CCS example. We started with a single project that stored 1 million tons of carbon dioxide over 3 years. We advanced that into another project, which is currently injecting on the order of 1 million tons per year. And then we phased into the new program, the CarbonSAFE program, which is the Department of Energy's current storage program, in a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, pre-feasibility, feasibility, and now an active project looking to get a permit as our main deliverable. So because we're able to build on the project before and increase our knowledge of the Illinois Basin as a location for carbon storage, this is how we've been able to deploy near commercial CCS in Illinois. So just a little bit about our current project. We have a project called the Illinois Storage Corridor. It is taking multiple industries and multiple sources of CO2. At the top, you have an ethanol plant, One Earth Energy, and at the bottom, you have Prairie State Generating Company, which is the most recent coal-fired power plant in the United States. We have a diversification of business and markets. We're looking at sustainability of industry and economic benefits to the area and ways to aggregate CO2 from multiple sources. And so the CarbonSAFE project is looking at characterizing a storage complex that can store on the order of 50 million metric tons of CO2 over multiple years. This is just a little bit more detail about those 2 plants. The final deliverable for this phase 3 is an actual underground injection control class 6 permit. I threw this in. I'm sure most of you are familiar with carbon capture and storage, but I just like to remind myself and others that the work we do happens far underground, and it's very important. The geology is really the linchpin to successful, effective, and viable CCS. In the Illinois Basin, we have an extremely suitable, well-suited package of sedimentary rocks. The Mount Simon sandstone is our basal sandstone. It's Ordovician in age, so it's not connected with any fossil fuel production, so very few well penetrations in the Mount Simon, and it's directly overlain by the Eau Claire Shale, which is a thick, regionally extensive, very dense cap rock for the Mount Simon as a storage unit. I'm going to talk about one project in particular, which is the project that I lead, the Illinois Basin Decatur Project, to give you a flavor of the way that this work has happened in Illinois. And I'm going to talk about our accomplishments first, because the project is almost at its finish. In fact, April 30th will be the last day for the project. We were successful in conducting a large-scale demonstration project in a saline reservoir at an active industrial site. We had 2 examples of permitting for these, first as the Illinois EPA and then with the federal government. We built an extensive stakeholder engagement strategy to build trusted relationships. We met and exceeded all of those technical challenges and non-technical challenges, barriers that we talked about at the beginning. We've done extensive site characterization and modeling, and we've built regional, national, and international partnerships and collaborations. And that's why it's so great for me to be here with you today, because this is a continuation of that relationship. By the numbers, we've stored more than 2 million tons of carbon dioxide from biofuels. This is for both projects at Decatur. We've drilled more than 5,000 meters of well, taken more than 245 meters of core, groundwater analyses on the order of 50,000 or more. We've used 1 million CPU hours in supercomputing, hosted many of you, and thousands of visitors from over 29 countries, and at least 100 people have worked over the last 20 years to make this program and these projects successful. There are 2 projects in Decatur. The one at the bottom is the Illinois Basin Decatur Project, and there are 3 wells. This configuration is the same for the Industrial Sources Project, which is to the north. The 2 injection wells, CCS1 and CCS2, are about a mile apart. The VW wells are our deep monitoring verification wells, and the GM wells are dedicated geophysical wells, which allow us to do repeat passive seismic monitoring. The 2 projects, as I mentioned earlier, built off of each other. And so the Illinois Basin Decatur Project was designed to inject CO2 for 3 years for a total volume of 1 million tons, which we did. We stored about 1,000 tons per day. We made significant contributions in geologic and social site characterization, modeling, risk assessment, monitoring, verification, and accounting, stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned. And then the Industrial Sources Project is designed to take the remaining 2,000 tons of CO2 per day that ADM produces in ethanol production, take all 3,000 tons and store that at that second location. Both projects have Class 6 permits. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. And the injection at the second project started in April of 2017 and continues today. This is a look at our monitoring density and technologies. One of the things I'd really like you to notice is that at the Illinois Basin Decatur Project, there's a higher density over a smaller area of the type of monitoring technologies that we tested. At the Industrial Sources, you see it has a broader distribution and perhaps not as many of the same technologies. And there's a really good reason for that. And the reason is that at the Illinois Basin Decatur Project, our purpose was research. And we decided that we were going to research every possible monitoring technology that we could think of and determine its efficacy in using it as a monitoring tool for carbon storage. And so what we did then when we worked on the second project is we decided which of those technologies worked the best, gave us the best results for monitoring, and then the frequency that also was most suitable. So we learned a lot that helped us advance monitoring technologies for future projects. We injected CO2, or we are injecting CO2 into the Mount Simon sandstone. The Illinois Basin Decatur Project's injection zone is at the base of the Mount Simon, so it is very close to the Precambrian basement. The Industrial Sources Project is injecting CO2 at a zone a bit higher up, about 150 feet higher. There's a very good reason for that, which I will show you here shortly. We've done 3D seismic. One of the things that we learned in the process of this project was that we needed to go back in and reprocess our seismic to help us answer some questions that we started to have because the project had microseismic activity as a function of injection. And we were really very focused on understanding the impact of that, the risk potential, and why we were seeing the microseismic activity that we were seeing. So this is this is a seismic inversion, a porosity inversion based on that reprocessed seismic. What you see over here on the right-hand side is actually the, that we have what are known as Precambrian highs in the basement, and the sedimentary rocks or deposits are overlain on those Precambrian highs. That has impacted the flow of CO2 through the reservoir, but also is related to some of our fractures and potential faulting in the region. And so understanding this mechanism, as I said a minute ago, has been extremely important to us to understand the story of what has been happening at the Illinois Basin Decatur Project. So this is a look at this is an aerial look at the microseismic events. What you see from the upper left, 2011 to 2014, those are microseismic events that happened during the Illinois Basin Decatur Project injection. The 2015 to 2017 period is when there's no injection happening at either project. And then 2017 to the present, the warmer colors, those are microseismic events that have happened since the start of the Industrial Sources Project. And one of the key takeaway here is that by moving just 150 feet up in the section of the Mount Simon, we are able to significantly decrease the amount of microseismic activity happening at the project. We've also done a significant amount of modeling and looking at history matching to understand what is happening in the reservoir. What you see on the left in blue is the history match for the Illinois Basin Decatur Project. Then you see some flat lines. That's the period where no injection is happening. And then the pink lines are the Industrial Sources history match for the second injection. We're also very interested in the plume distribution and looking at where the plumes are and whether or not they're interacting with each other. And as you can see here, this is an early version of this model. The Illinois Basin Decatur plume is towards you, and the Industrial Sources plume is a little bit further to the north. That plume will be larger now because it's a higher volume than has been injected so far. I also want to switch gears and talk a little bit about some of the other components to getting active industrial CCS going. So you may or may not know that there's a regulatory system in the United States. Anything that's injected in the subsurface or related to subsurface that could impact our safe drinking water is regulated under the Underground Injection Control Program. There is a specific class called Class 6, which is related to the storage of carbon dioxide. And in the United States, every state has its own potential to be what we say is to drive their regulatory process by having primacy. And there are 2 states right now that have primacy for Class 6, North Dakota and Wyoming. Louisiana probably will follow very shortly. But where I am in Illinois, the federal government is the one who is helping with getting the permitting. Excuse me. We have the only the only Class 6 permits which have been issued in the country to date have been issued in Illinois. There's been 6 that have been issued. 2 are in use, and those are both at Archer Daniels Midland in Decatur, where I was just talking about. The other 4 were for a project called Future Gen, which did not go forward when its funding expired. But one of the key things for being able to deploy carbon storage is that permitting has to be faster. And it was the rate limiting step for our projects and continues to be a challenge when it comes to commercial entities making commitments to do carbon storage, because there's a significant amount of uncertainty. And it took me a really long time to figure this out. And so I want to share the key point that I think everybody needs to understand when it comes to permitting. When you get a permit, what that does is it gives you permission to inject a well, or to drill an injection well. Once you drill that injection well, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the back end that you have to do before you get an authorization letter from the EPA, which allows you to inject CO2. So the uncertainty of that period is pretty significant. It's like getting a learner's permit when you get your driver's license. You know, there's all sorts of restrictions, and it's not until you've met a certain suite of criteria that you're allowed to drive by yourself. And that's really that period between the learner's permit and actual being able to inject has to be more, you have to be more accountable for what that timing is. We did a lot of stakeholder engagement. Your own Sue Havorka is very, very important in this space and has also done a lot of work. What we think about with respect to stakeholder engagement has really mostly been focused in the project space for those of us who do projects. But in order to get CCS widely deployed in the United States and around the globe, we need to be also focusing in the policy space and in the public space. And in the public space, I would add finance to that, because we need to have a broader perspective on utilization and deployment of CCS. I want to talk about some of the ways that you yourselves can be involved and how, excuse me, how the conversation is really changing. We have a new administration, has a very, very strong focus on climate change. And we live in a world where there are conflicting viewpoints, and we need to be able to move forward. And I really like this work that Tisha Schuler does out of Adamantine Energy. She has a newsletter I encourage anybody to sign up for, where she talks about these two things are true. And they're in conflict. The world requires oil and gas, and the dominant viewpoint is that the age of fossil fuels is over. And there's a problem associated with that. We've made energy so available and reliable, it's essentially invisible. And so how do we as energy practitioners help focus on the evolution of energy to meet our energy and our environmental objectives? And then this is some more of the way that Tisha explores that. So other things to be thinking about, other concepts that are connected to or are evolving to be very important in the CCS space: social license to operate. Do we have the buy-in from public and other stakeholders in order to deploy CCUS? Environmental social governance, which is financial pressure from investors for companies to be conducting themselves in specific ways to show that they are meeting environmental, social, and governance criteria. And then for many of you, what are the kinds of geoscience careers that are available? So just a little bit about this. Social license to operate is the informal agreement that infers that you have ongoing acceptance to go forward with projects. It has critical components listed here that are cumulative. You don't get to skip any of these steps, and each one of them can lead to acceptance or rejection. And once you lose trust, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get back. Environmental social governance, here are the criteria. The environment, it looks at whether or not industry is performing as a steward of nature. Socially, how it's managing its relationships, and the governance of what is its leadership doing, what is its fiduciary responsibility, and how is it responding to shareholder rights. And just to give you a flavor, these are from well-known companies this last year. This is from Baker Hughes, and many of you may know Allison Anderson, who's involved with Baker Hughes and their ESG focus. This is from Southern Company, who also has a very strong focus on this. And then this is from Adamantine Energy, and looking at things like the BlackRock investment letters, which is basically demanding public disclosure about sustainable accountability, climate-related risks, and how companies are showing that they will operate under the Paris Agreement. And then a little bit more about BlackRock. So if anybody wants these slides, I'm happy to share them, but you'll have them on the YouTube video. So the other thing, oops, sorry, let me go back there. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is, often as scientists or expert practitioners in whatever it is that we do, we can be somewhat siloed. And it's very necessary now that those silos are not in place, that we are figuring out ways to talk across problems from top to bottom, side to side, that we're having conversations with people with whom we do not share the same values or opinions, because we've got big challenges as a society that we need to face and to move forward with if we're going to continue to have the fantastic lives in the fantastic places where we live. So I'm wrapping up here and thinking about what we need to do going forward. I see 5 areas where we need to continue to build. We need connection, we need detail, we need assurance, we need to think about infrastructure and governance. And we need to be thinking about the systemic connections for the pieces that we've been working on, to even break the silos in CCS and be thinking about how we can have integrated systems that combine the technical, regulatory, legal, social aspects of what we do. And then lastly, how does this relate to you in your career as a geoscientist, or as somebody who is concerned about the climate, or just in general? I think the sky is the limit. It's a very exciting time to be alive. There's a lot of hope and opportunity. I think you need to accept the challenge to do hard things. Consider what you have that is unique and is a unique combination of your skills and experiences. Embrace what makes you uncomfortable. Communicate, learn to be a good communicator and be an influencer throughout whatever media you choose. Learn to tell good stories. Understand more than just what you do. I had a professor in my PhD program who taught us to attend the whole university. So not just go to seminars like this, which are in your discipline, but go outside of that and hear a concert or a lecture about something you don't understand, but understand more than your piece. Engage with conflicting viewpoints and understand what they are. And we really need to be thinking about things like diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, and especially the the ways in which environmental justice plays into the energy system. So with that, I'd like to thank the University of Illinois and the U.S. Department of Energy for their financial support. And I'd like to thank all of you for your interest today.
Thank you very much, Sallie.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your experience and your stories about CCS. So let me help you with the question that we got in the chat box.
Great.
So the first one is from Tracy Jones. Tracy, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? I think she might not be able to unmute. So let me read the question for you.
Sure.
Would you say that it is mostly permitting uncertainty with respect to how long it will take and what it will cost, eroding project value? Or is there also a real risk that the permit would not be granted? How many permits have been denied and why?
So that's a really interesting question. I think, I don't know exactly what the real risk is that a permit would be denied. There have been no permits denied. What happens when you engage with the EPA on a permit is that there's a back and forth dialogue that happens. So for example, if you haven't provided enough information about something, they will come back to you and say, we need more information. We don't understand this. Can you explain it to us? They'll have external reviewers. So that is part of what takes time. Where the risk lies for an investor or an industry partner that is going to move forward with a carbon storage project is right now they are hoping to be able to access a tax credit, the 45Q tax credit. And if you have uncertainty as to when you will be able to do that, whether or not you'll meet the deadlines for having an active project for that eligibility, that puts you at financial risk. And the other risk that happens is you could drill a well and not have the best geology or not be able to go forward with a project in the way that you had originally anticipated. And so there's a lot of factors that play into that uncertainty. So like any major project, you want to reduce as much of that as possible. But to date, no permits have been denied, and I'm not sure. I think it would have to be a highly unsuitable situation for a denial to actually happen.
All right, thank you. So next question is from our director, Dr. Scott Tinker. Scott, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, good morning, Sallie. Thanks.
Hi, Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for joining us and for the great talk. Hey, I was listening to the talk yesterday from Kansas survey about critical minerals and particularly the opportunities in solar and wind for jobs and other kinds of things. But the discussion went to the reality that the decision makers and the public, whoever that are, really don't understand that the impact of non-renewable solar panels and wind turbines and batteries, that it's all mined and that it's all manufactured in huge plants and then it's dumped in landfills, because even with recycling, really that's not happening that much at scale, and it's more expensive for the most part. So going to electric vehicles and to wind and solar at the scales that are being discussed in the timeframes is going to require a massive amount of mining and all those other things in that full cycle. And a lot of those materials are owned now by China. 50% of the world's lithium, 60% of the world's cobalt, buying up the nickel, 50% of the world's polysilicon for solar panels, et cetera. So in terms of energy security, just a lot of big environmental challenges. Now, these are opportunities for geologists, of course. We love mining, we're geologists, and environmental protection. But your perspective of the public license, that's really what I'd like to ask you about. Do you think the public's going to feel duped when they figure out that actually we're hurting the environment more than we ever have, and it's the environment they can see, and that it's not just about climate, but actually land and water and air matter too. How do you think the public's going to respond as this starts to happen at scale?
So Scott, that's first of all, such a great point and such a great question. And I think we're so far from the being able to make the connections. Like, I do think that, you know, in a couple of decades, the public is going to feel duped. There seems to be this incredible disconnect between what we want and what is, and sort of, as one young person I know who is related to me, who will remain unnamed, said to me, I want what I've been promised, and that is clean energy, no fossil fuels, protect the environment, but that isn't balanced with what it takes to drive our societies and have computers and have the ability to have this Zoom conversation. And so I'm not sure I have a good answer, but my gut tells me that we have to figure out ways to have these really difficult conversations about the gap between our aspirations and what is really practical, and how we're going to evolve the energy system to do that.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I got to work with Tisha at Aspen Institute thing a few years back for several different sessions we had there. And I think she and others are trying to do a nice job of helping us all understand that humans impact the earth. You know, and it really doesn't, you can shift the energy systems, but it's just going to have a different set of impacts. And some of those, particularly if they're done in non-regulated countries on a per product basis, they have more impact than if it's done here.
Yeah, well, you know, and how much are we willing to not see what's going on and sort of export our environmental impact to, you know, to other places, and that, you know, that focuses on what is your willingness to pay for the lifestyle that you want and that you expect. And, you know, again, I think increasingly we're going to start to see this the exploration about what this means from an environmental justice perspective. And so, like, I think it's just going to get harder. I don't think it's going to get any easier to answer these questions. But, you know, I mean, I think everybody feels a real time crunch to be able to make some progress. And the further divided we are in our opinions about how to do that is just setting us up for a lot of challenges going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, next question is from Rebecca Smith. Becky, you are welcome to ask your question.
Hi, Becky.
Hi, how you doing? It's good to see you, Sally.
You too.
Yeah, thank you. Great talk. I appreciate it. A good broad overview. I have a couple of questions here. One is, I saw that you had, at the ADM site, you have 24 research wells. And I saw that you separated out the soil gas monitoring stations, you know, in a different class, but you didn't mention whether there was any groundwater monitoring. So I'm just curious.
So, yeah, so those 24 research wells, 17 of those are shallow groundwater wells. So that's what we called a research well. And so there's been ongoing groundwater monitoring the entire time, about two or 3 years before we started injection. And literally, so injection stopped at the Illinois Basin Decatur Project in 2014. For permitting reasons, our well infrastructure got combined with the Industrial Sources Project. And so our post-injection site care period went from 3 years to 6 years. So that's what we're just finishing up now. And we've been doing quarterly groundwater sampling that whole time. And we've seen no out of bounds conditions as a function of the injection. And the groundwater monitoring is actually probably the most important technology in that whole space.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because, you know, I was thinking that on some projects, maybe we were going away from groundwater monitoring and skipping up to soil gas, and, you know, you would miss a pretty important interval there.
Yeah,
So,
soil gas has been informative, but it's not been the most informative. And so we really think that groundwater monitoring and isotopic and the isotopic analysis that's possible as a function of that, as well as trace elements, is critical.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One more question I have, and if you don't mind, I would like to ask a question of Scott in response to something he just said on this forum. And Scott, one of the things you said, that the mining and et cetera from renewables is going to create more environmental impacts than we've ever seen. I guess my question to you is, do we really fully understand the environmental impacts, especially to freshwater resources, from oil and gas industry? And, you know, that's something maybe we should look into.
Oh yeah, good. You know, and I think we are. All the work that Bridget and JP and others have been doing, and many around the world, and they're very real. You know, not trying to give anybody a pass here. Oil and gas and coal for sure, and other things related to drilling use fresh water. They produce salt water. You have to dispose of it. That's why we have TexNet, and so these are big challenges. I think that whenever you're extracting earth resources, whether you're drilling for them or open pit or downhole mining for them or drying them out in giant lithium lakes, you know, it impacts Earth's resources. The challenge comes with, and it's a very important one, is power density. To power 7.8 billion people takes a lot of energy, and particularly since 77% of those people have a very low per capita energy use today, and they are starting to grow. Over 3/4 of the world doesn't use much per capita, but it's starting to grow. Mostly Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts, you know, the Middle East and even Latin America. So as that grows per capita, the amount of energy consumption is phenomenal. And the lowest density forms of energy are the sun and the wind. They essentially don't show up on graphs because on a per square meter or per whatever, you know, some are measured in per unit volume or per unit area or per unit weight. And then you start to move up into wood and coal and liquid fuels, kerosenes and gasolines and diesels, and then into gases of different kinds, and then finally hydrogen. And then comes uranium and thorium, and it's completely off the scale. So the challenge in collecting low density intermittent energy is it just takes a lot of stuff, you know, to collect the sun and the wind at the scales we need and the intensities. And it just takes a tremendous amount of stuff, panels, turbines, and batteries to back them up. And I think that's really what we're not putting our heads around yet, is how much stuff when you're collecting low density energy as compared to high density energy.
Thank you. Good answer.
All right, next question is from Sue Havorka. Sue, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
So Sallie, you got me going talking about EPA, and you know, EPA's rules are 10 years old and are scheduled at some point for update. So my question from you to you is a real world question. You know, us, you've had the deepest experience working with EPA, seeing what the nature of the struggle is. What can we as CCS folks do, provide organized research that will help EPA create the optimized workflow for their permitting process? It's got to be both rigorous to protect the environment and weed out poor operators and not permit them if they're poor, but it's also got to allow commercial projects to go fast. And this is tough. So what do you think? What do you think we could do next?
A great question. So I was on a call yesterday with a workshop with the IEA, who's looking at sort of reinvigorating their work in the legal and regulatory framework space, and looking to create a series of handbooks that kind of help developing and other and developed countries think about their regulatory frameworks. And so these types of questions are, you know, they sort of went fallow for a while, and now I think they're emerging again. But as a part of that discussion, Ann Har-Kermegi at EPA was, or I'm sorry, at DOE was also on the call, and she, you know, she mentioned to me that the Omnibus Energy Act, or the Omnibus bill that went through, appropriations bill that went through, also passed the Energy 2020 Act. And as a part of that authorization bill, there is something about the underground injection control program, and the EPA or Congress is directing the federal government to review do the 6-year review, which has not happened, and to write a report within the next year that speaks to what changes, improvements potentially need to be made in the Class 6 regulations. So I think the first thing to do is for those of us who have been very active in this space to engage with DOE and EPA in that process, which involves research and other stakeholders, and to ask ourselves the questions about what is really possible. You know, direct plume monitoring, super challenging, right? Can we even really do that? You know, and yeah, I'm nodding yes, you're not nodding no, but I'm only nodding yes because I'm talking, you know, but it's like, those are the sorts of things that we need to, we potentially as a community of practitioners should, you know, meet amongst ourselves and sort of say, what is possible, what isn't possible, where do we see that we can make technological advances, and what has happened in the last, 10 years since that rule was promulgated. And, there was an effort a few years ago by the partnerships, the regional sequestration partnerships and DOE to capture some of our learnings about what the challenges have been. I think at this point, we've moved beyond what was highlighted in those conversations, and we need to be thinking about the technologies. And I was talking to somebody the other day about, and they were saying, well, how do you avoid bad actors in the CCS space? And I said, I don't think we really need to worry so much about bad actors as naive actors. And so I think we should also spend some time, especially when we can be in the same room with each other, having these kind of conversations about, okay, it's 10 years later, what do we as geoscientists and engineers think is practical with respect to the regulations?
Let's talk more.
Yes, always. Thanks, Sue.
So we have the last question from Niara. Niara, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Okay, let me read the question very fast. So a very interesting talk of the monitoring techniques tested in the research side. Which ones are deployed in the industrial side and which didn't make it?
So many of the technologies are deployed in the industrial site. So groundwater monitoring, deep fluid monitoring, real-time pressure and temperature monitoring as a function of the, in conjunction with the injection and the deep monitoring well. repeat seismic. The things that did not carry over, soil gas and resistivity. We did some surface resistivity testing. We had an eddy covariance tower at one point, which was designed to try and isolate different sources of CO2. It's a very complicated industrial site with a lot of sources of gas. And if any of you have been out there, it's kind of has a very industrial smell to it. So there's a lot that goes on there. And I'm trying to think and then we also did some PS INSAR, repeat flyover methods to determine whether or not there was any ground heave as a function of the injection of CO2. So those things did not prove out, and so we did not carry those forward.
All right, thank you very much, Sallie, for addressing all these questions, and thank you for your time and your great talk.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Sahar, could I share my screen, because there's a UT CCS, our colleagues in chemical engineering are putting on a quick CCS show, and might show it. Just Sallie might be interested. Let me if I can do my share. See if I can do share screen.
Sure.
And show our colleagues. It's just come up. Do you see it? Yeah. If anybody's interested, I have the flyer. Let me know. It's put on by chemical engineers, and they included us, the geologists. So, and it's a new thing. And it just showed up in my inbox. So I'll send it around if you let me know if you'd like it. Bye.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope to see you next week.